enablement doesn't stick without accountability and reinforcement. And accountability and reinforcement sit with the frontline managers.
Enablement has earned its seat at the table, but there's still this missing link between the work done and communicating that work in a way that resonates with CROs.
The most powerful moments are the ones where managers say, I wish I had a manager that I strive to be.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry, and this is a show about building cultures of learning inside companies. And joining me today is Gail Behun. Gail leads the frontline manager enablement at Zoom, supporting roughly 300 managers across sales, customer success, renewals, and solutions engineering. In this conversation, we dig into why the best coaching happens with frontline managers, how to avoid the classic trap of promoting top performers into misfit management roles, and practical ways to build manager capabilities without overwhelming them. We also get into how enablement can speak the language of CROs, and Gail shares a great example from her time now at Zoom. We talk about how to measure impact in a way that actually lands with the business and how Gail is using AI, right down to her own Gail Voice, a bot that helps her scale her impact and credibility. So if you're in sales enablement or responsible for developing people in any way, you're going to love this conversation. And with that, please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Gail Behun. Gail, welcome to the show.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me.
I am excited to dive into all things enablement, coaching, frontline managers. We've got a lot of topics that we've touched on together. And I think there's going to be a lot to share with the listeners.
So we've got like 6 hours booked, right? I mean, we're going to just do an all dayer. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is an all-day session. We'll be releasing it in segments.
That's perfect.
Let's start by setting the frame for folks. You've said that the best coaching comes from frontline managers. And I want to first sort of explore what happens when companies skip this, right? When they don't set the foundation and they just try and scale enablement through technology.
It's a great question.
And sorry. And just like, because another bit of context, you started at Zoom fairly recently, and this is where you started. This was your first focus. So why?
Yeah, I've had a really amazing opportunity to join a robust enablement team at Zoom, and my focus is only on frontline managers. Now, I say only, I've got about 300 of them globally, but Zoom recognizes the reality of the multiplier effect, right? If we can really make our managers multipliers for all of the initiatives, all of the drives, all of the backbone, the best way of doing things, we can drive that across the entire field team. And so I think to your original question, like what happens is enablement doesn't stick without accountability and reinforcement. And accountability and reinforcement sit with the frontline managers. And I'll say like enablement, we'll do everything else. We'll identify the problem. We'll build out the training. We'll come in and train the teams. We'll give you all the tools and techniques to reinforce it. But it has to sit with the frontline managers because we know that learning doesn't happen in enablement sessions. Sorry. Learning happens when we have to apply that knowledge in the role. And that's where our managers come in to say, hey, you learned this negotiation technique. Let's apply it to this deal that we're talking about right now here today, instead of the abstract concept of negotiations. So skipping that step means that the enablement efforts you're making are going to slip. You're not going to see the adoption that you're looking for.
Yeah, we're working on a program for a client now in the Cayman Islands. I'm actually about to fly out there, which is great to escape this snow that we're all experiencing right now. And it's the first time they're ever doing this. And there's a lot of the the mindset right now for these managers is like they're all high performers in their roles, and they've been now given this responsibility to coach and develop the people below them. And they want to do a good job at that, but they just have no idea how, right? Um, and so so I want to get your thoughts on like what it looks like for you when you're faced with that. But let's even first talk about those folks that don't want to do this. They're just like, I'm like, this isn't my job, like I've been knocking out my quota. Like I've got this team now, yes, it's helping me scale, but I have to coach and develop them. Like, how do you first shift that mindset to get someone to buy into this?
It's a great question. And I think we have to go even further back to make sure that we are actually promoting the right people into being frontline managers. Very often we're taking top performers and we're saying, we want you to be a manager to create 10 more Gails. But the reality is what makes Gail successful is not the same thing that's going to make Andrew successful. And so really good managers understand it's not about a rinse and repeat. It is about coaching to the person and their strengths and their way of working. And so we're very often promoting the wrong people. And we're promoting them and expecting them to be motivated by winning for the entire business or their team versus their individual motivation. Really great sellers are motivated because we love the win. It was one of the hardest transitions for me when I went from being a seller to a manager, because I was like, I'm going to miss that rah-rah moment. And what I figured out is I had 10 rah-rah moments because I had 10 team members, and I had to shift my thinking to how do I move that needle for all of them. And so the biggest mindset shift for managers is to understand what motivates them and then start to shift that motivation away from their individual needs to the needs of the group, and for them to start taking joy in, hey, I coached Andrew and Andrew won the deal. And even better, I coached Andrew and Andrew won 10 deals and I wasn't in the room for 9 of them because I've given him the skills and the information and the cutie to do that and grow exponentially. So it's a real mindset shift. I think we have to be really honest about it when we work with managers. We have to meet them and their intentionality where they are, and then help them seek joy in the wins of their business unit.
Yeah, that's very well said. It reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday, actually, with a software engineer who told me that the thing he's most proud of in his career, beyond any technical task that he's been able to ship, is the 2 customer service interns that he helped coach and develop into the engineering team. And he's like, that stands out far above everything he's done in his career. And so it really is something that, people can find a lot of joy and fulfillment in.
Yeah. And I think we need to set up better manager pathways. So one of the ways I've done that in the past is building out nesting programs where new hires nest with current sellers. And that current seller is in charge of bringing that person up to speed, letting them sit in on calls, doing some drive-bys. It really kind of tests, while still being an IC, so it really tests for the seller, is this a path that I would enjoy? Do I want to do this at scale? We look at leadership as the natural next step in your career, but it doesn't have to be. There are so many other ways to rise in your career and still be an individual contributor and still have great joy and new horizons. So I think a lot of times we get people who step into management because they feel like that's the next step, and it may not be the right step for them. So we have to give them opportunities to kind of pressure test it before we promote them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And we'll come back to this idea of the individual contributor and how it's becoming more and more of a viable career path for people. That you don't have to take a management position, but let's go back to management, and let's go back to my original question. So, as I like this framing of kind of the motivation of why we want to do this, but what is next? So these managers, they're like, I want to do a good job. I want to develop these people, but I don't know how. I don't have the tools for it. So where do you start?
So that's a great question, because I think for every business, it's going to be a little bit different. And so for me, coming in as a new leader within the ecosystem, I've done a lot of listening. I've had over 60 different one-on-ones with managers all across the bow tie, because I have managers from sales to CS to renewal to SE. So I have the whole groups. And so I'm really doing that to listen to what is their career tenure, where are their pain points, what are they looking for enablement to lean into for them. And then looking to build, as enablement does, scalable and repeatable systems where we can say every month we're going to have a manager hub update. You'll have a manager huddle live session. And then for me, being able to go down that layer and say, okay, how do I create programming that is based on what I've heard and where I see the numbers are telling me where there are gaps, and really targeted at those groups. Like I said, I've got about 300 managers, which is an average sales team size. It's a lot of people. So I have to be very specific. And this is what I heard a lot in listening tours of, we don't want generic enablement. We don't want generic how to manage. We want specific mid-market in EMEA management techniques. And so for me, also leaving space to be really targeted gives a lot more impact. And by doing the way that I do that is I bring the voice of the manager in as much as possible. They are working with me on session creations. They're working with me on development and delivery so that it really resonates with the people who are doing this job every day.
Yeah, yeah, I like that it's coming from them. It's sort of it's enablement by the people for the people. What are some of the common challenges or roadblocks that you face in this?
I think the frontline manager role has become almost untenable. Like we're just asking too much. And I'm just starting to see a little shift with technology helping to allow them to do more at scale. I think the biggest challenge is legitimately time. And it's not that they're not willing to spend the time. It's that for a manager, they can spend an hour developing themselves as a manager, or they can spend an hour getting a deal over the line. The business will say to them, we want you to improve your skills, but don't miss the deal. That push-pull is real. And because so many of our managers came from being in the field, they want to go win the deal. They still love winning deals. And so we haven't created space for them to be able to do both. We pay a lot of lip service to the idea of self-development and things like that, but we don't create space for it. And so I think making sure that our managers understand what's in it for me, the WIFM of participating in these programs, being willing to be vulnerable and say, here are my gap areas, and lean into it, I think is good. I think for me, the other thing is building a movement, right? So I'm going to start small with a handful of managers and then start spreading that. Hey, we've done these collaborative sessions. Here's how they look, and share that out and start trying to get people to say, I want to buy into this. When we talk a lot about carrots and sticks, right? Like I don't have a stick. I can't make these managers do anything. They don't report to me. And the managers will say the same things about their sellers, right? Like they do report to me and I still don't have a stick. And so I built what I call carrot programming. Like, hey, we've got this great topic. Here's an article or a TED Talk or a chapter of a book. Read this. Let's have some groups to discuss it. And then we'll take those takeaways and come out with a report to folks that say, hey, here's what your peers are saying on how to deal with this sticky situation. Here's what I'm hearing from the field on how to navigate this. And so it becomes, again, democracy. It's from them for them. But it's codified globally in a way that allows them to absorb it.
Yeah, I like that. That's very powerful. And what are some of the reactions you've seen? Like, what are some of your favorite moments from individuals that have gone through your programs?
I think the most powerful moments are the ones where managers say, I wish I had a manager that I strive to be. Because we learn to manage by the people who managed us, right? And so if you didn't have a great coaching mentor manager, you didn't learn to do it that way. And so when newer managers or any stage manager in their career learns how to be that powerful mentor, that true coach, they realize, wow, I never had that. And I wish I had. Think what I could have done. And then they become even more excited about the process of the possibility of what this new manager paradigm looks like for them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I can relate to this in the sense of being a parent and how you think about like some of the things that you wish you had, maybe your parents didn't give you. And obviously everyone's doing their best as a parent, but no one's perfect. And so there are always these gaps, right? And so there's like as a parent, it's like, oh, I'm gonna do that for my kids, right? Like and it's just I think that's a really cool parallel to managing, and I've often made that connection. I think managing, leading people, it is so similar to parenting in many ways. Setting that example, um, showing, not telling. All of these kind of principles that we want to get across.
Yeah. And that's also where, as I've done this listening tour, what I've heard universally is we want to hear from each other. We want to talk to each other. We don't have a lot of time to talk to each other. Can we make it powerful?
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing is when another manager says, yeah, I've dealt with this. Here's how I dealt with it. And they hear maybe to validate their thinking or to change their thinking, that in the trenches opinion becomes 10 times more valuable than anything they could learn from me or from a book or a TED Talk.
That's so true. I think this is one of my favorite points we've talked about so far, because I saw this at Workday as well. Like the best sessions and the most popular sessions were ones in which we just facilitated a conversation where one of the managers in the group was like, oh, it's a spotlight session. And they were sort of showing like some dashboard they created or like some template they use or whatever. And the questions are just nonstop from the audience. And everyone's like, oh, and how does this work? And how do I,
Yeah.
you're so right. I mean, yeah. Before we move on to measurements of these types of programs, is there anything else you can add around this of like things lessons you've learned and tips for doing this well, like bringing them together to talk, to share, to like bring best practices to the front?
I think two best practices in general. One is when you're partnering with people from the field, with the manager, make them the face of it. And so, they're not coming to the session to hear from Gail. They're coming to hear from Brian or Colleen or some of their peers. And that also has the feeder effect of other managers saying, hey, I got an idea.
Yes.
Right. So instead of saying, what topics do you want? You give them something good and they come back and say, oh, I want to give you something good. So it creates that virtuous cycle that we really want. And I think the other thing is don't underestimate the power of even going small. I think especially at a bigger org like a Workday or a Zoom where you have hundreds and hundreds of people, it feels daunting. How am I going to get to all of them? And the answer is you're not. I've targeted like a group of like 200 out of my 300, like 110. Like if I can move the needle in this group, I'm in really good shape. I got a whole bunch of managers. They don't need me. They're doing great. I got a whole bunch of managers that are going to be, probably coached out of the business because they're not in the right chair. So it's the same thing when we coach sellers. You look at that middle group and say, how can I move the needle here? And be really specific. Like, what does move the needle mean? And then communicate it to them. Like, hey, you folks are in the middle. I want to see you get up by 5% quota attainment. Are you with me? Do you want to do that? Because that 5% is going to net out X. Are you excited about that? And then, if I have 10 people or 100 people in a program, it doesn't matter because it's very targeted on that specificity rather than trying to peanut butter everything. Enablement, we try to peanut butter a lot because we have a lot to do and cover. But peanut buttering doesn't work very well. We have to be honest. If we can go specific and small, we're going to have more of an impact than trying to touch everyone with a lower impact program.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a good segue into a conversation around the measurement piece, because in your work, and I think as in the enablement community and with Revenue Enablement Society, you've written an article on, I think, CROs speak.
Yes.
And this idea of like, that enablement has earned its seat at the table, but there's still this missing link between the work done and communicating that work. in a way that
Yeah.
resonates with CROs. And I think this is so important. We teach this in our IC programs. It almost doesn't matter what work you've done if you can't communicate it and land it in the right way. And so what does, and I'm gonna, yeah, we'll come back to the specific specificity and focus piece. But first of all, what does CRO speak, and what does that actually sound like?
Somebody told me I should open a Duolingo course, and I was like, "Oh, that would be kind of fun." Um,
That's a great idea. I love that.
right? I mean, it's the same thing that, we learned as sellers about being persona specific is really deeply learning the persona of your CRO and understanding how do they communicate? What language are they using to bring that language back to them? They're all creating a vision and a strategy and an execution and a measurement of the SEM document now, right? So really understand as an enablement professional what the heck that actually means to the business. And then making sure every time you're talking about a program, you're tying it back to their goal, literally saying in your document, your goal is to reduce churn. This is huge, not just at Zoom, but everywhere is trying to reduce churn right now. Churn levels are high post COVID, buying patterns are changing where, companies are not equipped to really attack churn mitigation. So whatever programs I'm doing that are around that, I'm going to very explicitly say this program ties to the big rock around churn mitigation. The target for this group of people, the lever I'm pulling is this, and this is the outcome I am looking to drive, right? Now that outcome is a super lagging indicator. Super lag, right? I mean, it's super long. So I'm going to say, here's what I want to drive. And then here are going to be some of my leading indicators. CROs don't tend to like leading indicators. They feel fluffy, but I want to be able to show like, hey, this leading indicator leads to this, that leads to this, so leads to churn mitigation, right? So it might be a confidence score out of live trainings and a certification. There's not a CRO who's not going to roll their eyes or like, oh, certification.
Mhm.
I want to
Right.
be able to say, this is why it matters, why it's a leading indicator. And here's how it leads into the next one. Here are our call intelligence logs that are showing here's how the teams are using these churn mitigation techniques in live calls. So we have to be willing to vary, and not just for CROs, for ourselves, for all of our stakeholders, tie together those metrics, the story we're telling, and bring it right back up to the top. And when we do that, the CRO goes, yeah, I can connect the dots. You can see where you're going, how you're going to get there. Thanks. And then you get that buy-in we always talk about.
Yeah, and I think the key word for me there is story. You piecing together the metrics into a story, so it's a cohesive narrative, and stories just make more sense to people. Like, and if you can tell a credible story, it's like then it's a lot of information compressed into one thing, and it's like, okay, I'm with you, go for it. Tell me what you see in a few months' time.
Well, and I know we're going to talk AI at some point, but this is where AI can also be your best friend. Like start building a persona map of your CRO,
Yeah.
articles,
Oh,
and things that she has said, plug those in, and then take your enablement plan and say, I have to pitch this to Janet. Give me the key talking points, map it to what she cares about, make it specific to your CRO. Just like, again, in selling, we make it specific to our person, make it specific, use chat. I tend to overwrite everything. I mean, I can write a 4-page document that should be 4 paragraphs because I want to tell the whole story and I want to like talk about how all the cool stuff we're going to do and this, that, and the other, and they don't care. So I use it a lot to go condense, simplify, and put it executive speak in a way that helps me to communicate. And then, by the way, here's the 4-page document linked in that I know no one's going to look at, but I still have fun writing it because I need that to build the entire program. The CRO speak is narrowing it down and giving those justifications and showing the vision and the story in a way that resonates.
I think that's a mistake some people make, and I've certainly made this a lot in my career, is you go straight to the soundbite because you think like, okay, well, this is, and AI can help you with this, but you skip the 4-page document that you need to do to kind of understand it properly, right? To
Yeah.
like get to a soundbite that actually makes sense. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I love that. That's a really cool process. I love the call out to AI as well, that you can take all the calls that you've had with your stakeholders, put them in, create that persona, and be like, what are they going to ask me? What are questions they're going to have? So
Yeah.
powerful.
One of the things our teams did recently was start creating 10%, 30%, and 80% plans, right? And so the 10% plan was the napkin sketch. We're thinking about this. 30%, we've got it kind of baked. 80%, we're ready to roll it out. And so when you set that expectation with your teams and your stakeholders of we're going to step into this, that also makes a marketable difference in writing the story, editing the story, and then telling the story, because you're giving yourself those mile markers and expectations of what happens at every step. And I didn't create that. It came from a great article that was shared from my leadership team and my previous org. But I love that technique as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, I think it ties to what we were saying. It's sort of the creative process. And what this 10, 30, 80 thing allows you to do is share at each point. So you're not, it's actually a good nuance to what I said earlier. Like, you need to have a 4-page document, but to get feedback early is so key before you go and create a whole 4-page thing and you spent a few days on, and it's like, oh, this totally missed the mark. Like, go share like a nugget, get some feedback, go more, and then eventually build it out, and then again compress it down to
Yeah.
finally communicate to the stakeholder. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great advice. So let's move on to, okay, I mean, let's talk about your use of AI. So you have you told me last time you have this Gail Voice AI. Can you tell me more about that? And then I've got some follow-up questions.
I'm a kind of a geek. I was actually working with Star Wars metaphors for a session coming up earlier, which is really, really fun. So yeah, I built an AI bot on a challenge on like build yourself a bot. And I was like, I'm going to build me a bot. I'm going to build the Gail Voice bot. And so to do it, the goal of it was to create something from which I could easily create LinkedIn messages or emails that has the tone that feels very authentic for me. And so I went in and built in a handful of writing samples of mine, some podcasts I had done, gave a little bit of a personality, like I'm very straightforward and I love using analogies and I can be a little snarky, but in a loving way. And then just honed and refined it. And what that has done is given me a really good tool to use. And very often, maybe I'll read something or have a quote from somebody and I'll go into Gail Voice and say, hey, I had this idea and this insight. And I do literally talk to my ChatGPT a lot of the day now. I talk to it and I'm like, I had this idea. And I read this thing and it really got me thinking, blah, 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 blah. Give me like 3 angles on how I can turn that into a communication that would resonate. And I've told it like my readers are enablement professionals, blah, blah, blah. And it'll come back with a couple ideas. And then from there, I'll usually script something out and say, hey, give it a little Gail Voice sparkle. What it's done, and I had somebody ask me on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago, like, well, wouldn't it just be easier to write your own? And I'm like, it could. I mean, I've written my own LinkedIn post for 20 years. But the thing I like about that is I can also then go, hey, I want to challenge this post. How is that going to resonate? Does it sound pretentious? What else am I missing? Maybe give it a view for newer in career folks. Like I can use it to ideate on the Gail Voice in a way that makes it, gets me out of my bubble, right? Like I have a way I want to tell this story, but that isn't the only way. And so it also helps me kind of open my eyes to like, oh yeah, you could take this angle, you could take that angle. And it's really forced me to be more creative, not less, which I think is, most people don't think AI is going to do that, but for me, it's absolutely done it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a post on this recently. I totally agree. I think it's also true that it can do all the thinking for you and you can totally use it in that way. But if you really want to create, but then you get slot, and so you can tell if someone's doing that. But if you really want to create something, I think you can create something really unique and really true and authentic to yourself, and in an enhanced way using AI, because it opens you up to other perspectives that our feeble human brains can't, we can't take on all of these at once, and so you can get like whatever perspective you want, and then you kind of build on that. It's incredibly powerful as a thought partner.
Yeah, I love it. My kids remind me every day I'm killing the planet, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, throwing compute at the problem. To build on this a little bit, how do you think about using it as a productivity tool for yourself, and then using it to like in an enablement delivery? Like, how do you compare and contrast that?
Yeah, I think the first foray for most people into AI is using it as a productivity tool. Write this email, do this research for me, take these call transcripts, and give me a summation. And it's a really good kind of first step. And I see a lot of orgs using it. I don't know a seller who's not using it at this point. They're using it for executive summaries. They're using it for emails. Some of them are sloppy and they're getting email slop, but a lot of them are getting smart about how they can create more specific personas, how they can more targeted marketing, and really honestly better understand their buyers ahead of the time. I think when we think that's the productivity side, I think where we are going and we're going to start to see our tools um, help us dramatically is more insight. Like I'll go into, and Zoom has an amazing call intelligence product called Zoom Revenue Accelerator, or ZRA. And I'll go into ZRA and say, analyze this deal. What am I missing? Where's the pothole that I haven't seen yet? Look at these 10 similar deals. And, I have to prompt it to look at specific things, but look at these 10 similar deals. What did you see in those deal flows? And maybe 5 were win and 5 were loss, that will inform where I need to go next. That's the crystal ball moment that we're not quite at yet, but we will get to very quickly. Where it becomes more anticipatory and it becomes more challenging, right? I want my AI to say to my seller, like, hey, Andrew, I think you're missing this. I don't think your angle here is correct, right? And ask it, like I challenge my AI all the time. What makes you think that? I want it to challenge us back. I think your assumption about this customer or the market or the product set is incorrect. Have you thought about this? And then when we get that healthy dialogue and that healthy tension with our AIs, I think we go back to our manager level. Our manager level then becomes around how do we coach to leveraging that at scale rather than just deal by deal. When that AI layer can say, hey, Andrew's really weak on negotiations and gives away a lot of discounting. We should probably work on that. And by the way, Andrew plus 5 of your other sellers are looking at the same challenges. That becomes a business changer and a sales approach changer.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. There's so much untapped potential with AI right now, and to think, oh, I mean, there's power users in every company, but to think when that becomes a tool that everyone is up to that level on, I mean, it's crazy, like to think about that.
Yeah.
It really is. So at the risk of going down the AI rabbit hole for the rest of this podcast, I want to sort of bring us home with 2 final questions. The first is to invite you to look back in your career to a moment where you made a mistake, something failed, something didn't quite work out, that you look back on and you learned an important lesson from. What story comes to mind?
It goes back to what I was saying earlier. Honestly, it was when I realized I wasn't as good a manager as I thought I was. Because I moved into a management role for the first time. I was like 35 and I was promoted because I was really good at what I did. And I didn't have a great manager template. And so I was creating my own, and I thought I was awesome. And then I had, one of my sellers, thank God, on a road trip finally said, Gail, this doesn't work. The way you're approaching this, the way you're thinking about it doesn't work. And it wasn't that it didn't work for her. It didn't work. And I didn't have the self-awareness to understand that. And I didn't have the self-awareness to understand, like, hey, because you didn't have a good manager, you don't have a template. Right. And so I realized I had to break that cycle. And it's, why I'm so passionate about manager enablement, because most of us don't. Most of us don't have great templates, right? We don't know what good looks like. And you can read a lot of books, but until you get into like practicing it, having somebody to coach ideas off of each other, like until you create that active cycle, you can't really get great at it. You can be functional. There are tons of functional managers, but the difference between good and great is a chasm when it comes to management. And I was definitely not, I don't even know if I was on the good side. I was definitely not on the great side. And so I had to take a lot of self-learning and humility to go, hey, just because you were a good seller, and I was a really good seller, didn't mean I was a good manager. I was the poster child for that. And I had to grow up and grow into that role through that learning.
Mm. Yeah, look at you now. You're leading manager enablement at one of the biggest companies in America. Yeah. No, it's amazing. I mean, and it starts with awareness, right? Just knowing like, okay, I have a gap here, and I need to do something about this. It sort of ties back to what we were saying at the beginning. Okay, so last question. I think there's a lot of people I know. I'm talking to a bunch who are looking for new roles, and many who are landing new roles. And so I thought it'd be useful to end off with your advice. Having just started recently-ish a new role, doing leadership development at a very fast-growing company. What is one thing you'd tell someone stepping into this kind of a role? What's one piece of advice you would leave with them?
Oh, there's so many hard ones. Tech especially moves really, really fast. And so there's a pressure when you start a new role to know everything and dive in quickly. And I have been guilty of that over and over. And I have an amazing boss at Zoom who's given me space to say, keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. Like I'm 90 days in. I haven't presented my charter yet. I've written it. I haven't presented it yet. And I won't for another month and a half. And because of that, it keeps growing and shifting and becoming more specific and better. And so as hard as it is in tech to say, take your time, you can't assume because you were in another tech company or a like company that where you are today operates the same way. It just doesn't. And so if you don't, just like enablement needs to be specific, you have to be specific and go really deep, and don't cheat yourself on listening to calls and doing listening tours and trying out the product and doing ride-alongs with sellers. Like don't cheat yourself on that time, because you'll pay for it if you don't do it in the beginning.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good advice. Just everyone, I think you have more time than you think, and I can definitely relate to that. We tend to rush ourselves a lot. It also helps having a leader like yours, though. To be fair, like someone who's like aware of that.
Very
That's
lucky.
also
Yes.
key. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Gail, that was amazing. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure the listeners did too. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. And I look forward to more conversations. Tag me on LinkedIn as folks have questions. I'm always up for talking to strangers. That's how I built my network. So glad to be part of it.
We will blast this everywhere, and we will put links to your articles, to your LinkedIn, and all that. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.